people know in theory that Paramapurusha is always with them, that he is their nearest and dearest one, yet he does not come without their personal realization. This is called spiritual bondage. For such people, Paramapurusha remains confined to the abstract scriptures and does not become a living realization. Spiritual aspirants must liberate themselves from this bondage by dint of their sadhana. So people may attain temporary bondage from physical or psychic bondages, but they fall into those bondages again the next moment. There may be temporary victory, but it is again followed by defeat. Ultimate victory is impossible. In Sanskrit, victory is jaya and complete victory is vijaya. Spiritual bondage is different from psychic or physical bondage, because once the spiritual aspirant realizes Paramapurusha, that realization becomes permanent. If you take food in a restaurant daily, you will also have to pay every day. You cannot pay once for always. Hence the term artha is not used in the spiritual sphere. Rather we use the word paramartha, the ultimate permanent relief from bondage. This paramartha, as I said earlier, remains confined to the scriptures of the philosophers, and thus the useless philosophical discussion. Paramapurusha may or may not remain in the book of the devotees, but he is surely present in their hearts. By dint of sadhana and kirtan, devotees bring the supreme flow of spirituality into the practical world. They taste it and bathe in it. Paramapurusha is not an object of bookish knowledge, of philosophical speculation. He is the soul of souls, the nearest entity to a devotee's heart, the one with whom a devotee is constantly playing and conversing with laughter and joy. That blissful satisfaction in a devotee's heart is conspicuously absent in that of a philosopher. Thus the supreme entity is beyond the scope of the physical and psychic spheres. The physical and psychic spheres are assailed by the limitations of relativity, but the spiritual world is free from such limitations. The supreme entity is absolute, but it also touches the realm of relativity. This descent from the absolute to the realm of relativity is not properly understood by the philosophers. They say that the realm of the absolute is not at all accessible to the human mind, and hence the mind is incapable of judging or analyzing the supreme entity, and hence the mind is incapable of judging it. Thus philosophers are totally incapable of explaining why Paramapurusha is so closely associated with the relative world and with human beings. In none of the books of the philosophers can we find the proper reply to this query. Devotees are always ready to reply. They say, O philosophers, it is a fact that Paramapurusha resides in the unmanifested world. Now you philosophers, just imagine that you are alone in this universe. Will you not become mad if you remain alone with your analytical bent of mind? In the same way, our Lord did not want to remain alone, so he manifested himself in various forms just to associate himself with them, to play with them. The explanation of the devotees is simple and straightforward. Some people may complain about this strange game, Lila of Paramapurusha. In Sanskrit, an action with whose cause is known to human beings is called krida, and an action whose cause is not known is called lila. The actions of the Supreme Consciousness are called lila, because we do not know their cause. They may say, what a strange lila is this, because of this lila we have to undergo so many trials and tribulations. But the point is, he is playing his lila with none other than his own creations. Thus he certainly has the moral right to do so. The devotees tell the philosophers that Paramapurusha has the right to play his divine sport with them. Thus they find no reason to complain. This sets the philosophers thinking. They conclude that the devotees are correct, because the devotees have a very close relationship with Paramapurusha, whereas they are outside of his intimate circle. They fail to understand where to draw the line of demarcation between the macrocosmic flow and microcosmic flow. They simply churn through hundreds of pages of books, without any practical realization. So the philosophers feel deflated, while the devotees proclaim, Nityachi vrindabane amito nai hari chara, dakle hari aspe kache, dakle pare de se chara. I am always in the divine realm of Vrindavan. I am never without my Lord. My Lord will come to me whenever I seek him. He responds to my slightest call. So the devotees truly enjoy the presence of Paramapurusha, whereas the poor philosophers are so foolish that they remain far from him. Then the philosophers start pondering over the issue of conversion from absolute into relativity. They wonder, how is it possible? How can it be done? What is the primordial factor, the causal matrix behind this creation? The philosophers start racking their brains to find the answer. Kalaha svabhavo niyatir yadrisha bhutani yonihi purusha iti shintya samyoga ishamna tvatma bhava datma pyanishaha sukha dukkha heto. Kala svabhavaha. What is that absolute entity? Some say it is Mahakal, or time eternal, because they say everything is embedded in time. However, everything occurs within the vast scope of eternity. Thus can we call time the absolute factor. The devotee objects, how can the time factor be the supreme entity? Time is the mental measurement of the motivity of action. Where there is no action, or where there is no mind to measure, there cannot be any time either. If there were no earth, or if the earth had not revolved around the sun, or if there were no developed living beings to measure the movement of the earth around the sun, then there would have been no days, months, or years. We could not have measured them, and thus there would have been no time either. Hence the existence of time depends on two factors, the motivity of action and the instrument to measure this motivity of action. Judged in this light, time cannot be the ultimate factor. So the devotees advise the philosopher to look elsewhere for the absolute. There is nothing like eternity, because what we call eternity is a collection of numerous fragments of time. The concept of fragments of time arises in the human brain. Suppose a person becomes senseless at 12 o'clock. When that person regains senses after 5 hours, he thinks that it is still 12 o'clock. During the period of senselessness, his mind was not able to measure the motivity of action, and hence time ceased to exist. Then should the philosophers not admit that the devotees are correct? Then the philosophers turn to another hypothesis, that nature or svabhava is the absolute entity, but this is also not acceptable. Whatever is taking place in this universe happens in a particular style. That style of functioning is called nature. Nature can't be considered to be the entity which creates this style of functioning, because nature is not a conscious agent. There can be no intellectual justification for this supposition, nor can we call nature a blind force, because it follows a particular system, a particular style of functioning. Suppose a person is cooking food according to a particular style. Who is cooking? That person or the style of cooking? The answer is, the person is cooking. The sun rises at a particular time and sets at a particular time. It follows a particular system, which we call nature. However, the conscious agent which is working in this particular style is not nature. The philosophers must accept this argument also. So the philosophers turn to still another hypothesis, that niyati or fate is the absolute factor. Whatever is fate cannot be averted. They say, this is equally unacceptable to the devotees because, after all, Who is that entity who spins our fate? Ram's fate is different from Sham's fate. Who created these different fates? Fate herself cannot determine that. Daivanya deyamiti kapurashaha vadanti udyoginam purushami purusha simhamu paeti lakshmi yatne kritya yadina siddhyati kutra doshaha. Cowards say that everything is determined by fate. In reality, however, those people with tremendous initiative or enterprise are crowned with success. Cowards say, if one makes intense efforts and then fails, what is the harm? But devotees say, no, no, this is sheer fatalism. One who believes in fatalism will have to simply lie inert. Devotees say that fate is simply the collection of unrequited samskaras. A person who performs an action has to undergo the reaction to that action. If his body is old, the reaction of that action may not be expressed in this lifetime. Only when the same person is reborn will his unserved samskaras be expressed. He cannot remember the action of his previous life because he has acquired a new brain. So he takes the expression of those samskaras to be his fate. In fact, they are not his fate. They are merely the reactions of his previous actions of his previous life. The philosophers contend that astrologers are able to predict people's future by preparing their horoscopes. They may be correct, for in this universe everything follows a particular rhythm. Nothing is isolated, everything is interconnected. Even a tiny ant does not die a premature death. If an ant does die prematurely, the entire universe becomes unbalanced and loses its rhythm. Everything in this universe, whether great or small, is a dignified member of the universal family. To enjoy equal importance, none shall be slighted. When people are reborn, they carry the samskaras, the reactive momenta, which remained unrequited in the previous life. According to their samskaras, they are born under a certain planetary system in the solar system, and during their lives they must act and move within the scope of a particular sign of the zodiac. Thus everything follows a particular system. It can be inferred that people of such and such nature are born under a certain planetary position. The science of astrology was formulated on the basis of such a theory. But in this regard, simply surrendering to fate would be sheer foolishness. The philosophers say to the devotees, yes, these ideas appear to be logical, but then they take up another hypothesis. Is yadrisha or accident the cause of creation, they ask. Some people say that this creation is accidental, but the devotees retort that this is simply absurd. In this universe, nothing is accidental. So how can accident be accepted as the ultimate cause of creation? It is merely a simplistic attempt to hide one's ignorance about the ultimate cause. One should remember that each and every incident is causal, nothing is non-causal. When some incident takes place abruptly, we call it an accident, because the effect has taken place so suddenly that we cannot determine its cause. Thus we use the word accident, just to cover up our failure to detect the cause behind the effect. These arguments convince the philosophers that the idea that accident is the ultimate cause of the universe is simply absurd. Then is matter, of which this universe is composed, the ultimate cause of creation. Here the questions arise, from where does matter come? And from where does intellect, the supple mind of a human being, come? We must accept that the potentiality of mind was lying hidden in matter. Otherwise, how could mind originate from matter? The strange thing is this, that the same mind which originated from matter is also controlling matter. The hands, feet, eyes, nose, ears, mouth, etc. of the human body, which are all material, are all controlled by mind or intellect. If mind originated from matter, then how does mind control the same matter? Suppose the body is hungry for food, but the mind insists that it will not eat anything, it would prefer to commit suicide rather than eat. Then who will win, mind or matter? Mind will certainly triumph over matter. This proves that mind exercises authority over matter. Mind is subtle, and the crude emerges from the subtle. Matter works under the guidance of the cosmic mind. So the philosophers are convinced that matter too is not the ultimate cause of creation. Then is unit consciousness or Jivatma the ultimate cause of creation? The devotees argue, how is that possible? Although the Jivatma is the witnessing entity, which cannot perform any original action by itself, it always maintains the closest proximity to the mind and is inseparably associated with it. Suppose a person does something wrong, physically or mentally, and imbibes a set of samskaras. According to the previous samskaras, he was a human being, but according to the newly acquired samskaras, he is reborn as a dog. The progress of degradation of the human mind has a different effect on the apparent progress of degradation of the soul, because of the soul's close proximity to the mind. Suppose a piece of red cloth is placed in front of a mirror. The mirror will appear to be red, but in reality it is the cloth which is red, not the mirror. The same applies to the unit consciousness. Hence an entity which is affected by the mind cannot be the ultimate cause of creation. When it has the limitation of being assailed by another entity, it is certainly not the supreme agent. The philosophers are now quite confused, but the devotees are guided by clear logic. According to them, all objects and actions that we perceive are reflected on the supreme reflecting plate. If this reflection does not take place, the existence of an object or action remains unsubstantiated. Suppose you come in contact with an object. For you, the object is real, because the vibrations of that object are reflected on your mental plate. You extend your hand, and your hand feels the existence of that object. Due to this tactile contact, you accept that the object exists. Likewise, when the vibrations of external objects transmitted through your nerves are reflected on your chitta, and those vibrations on the chitta are reflected on the aham tattva, and those on the aham tattva are reflected on the maha tattva, and finally, when those of the maha tattva are reflected on the unit consciousness, you have attained your real atma or soul. Although the atma itself has no merits or defects, it is affected by the samskaras of the mind. Only when the unit consciousness is fully reflected on the supreme reflecting plate, cosmic consciousness, is the real Parama Purusha attained. The philosophers are finally convinced by this cogent logic. When you realize that everything is Parama Purusha, you will have to channelize all your physical, psychic and spiritual faculties, all your hopes and aspirations, longings and desires towards that supreme entity. Only then will you come in the closest proximity to him. Let us take an analogy. Yata darpana bhavo abhashano mukam vidyate kalpana himekam tata divyoge nirabhashako yaha saha nitya palabdi swarupe matma. Suppose there is a certain person surrounded by 15 or 20 mirrors. In those mirrors, 15 or 20 faces are reflected. Each mirror thinks that it possesses a particular face. The real face is amused at this, because it knows that it is not possessed by any mirror. Those faces reflected in the mirror are just like the microcosmic minds. Every human being, every unit entity, has a mind. In matter, mind is dormant, but the potentiality of minds is ever present. Mind even exists in wood, rocks, sand, stone, etc. Wherever there is the expression of mind, there is also the reflection of the unit consciousness. Through scientific research, this dormant mind may also express itself one day. Even in matter, it is not at all impossible. A tiny grain of sand, today, will one day be transformed into a great scholar, an extraordinary personality. Every atom has that possibility. Thus, those reflected faces in the mirror are the unit consciousness, and the real face is Paramapurusha. When this reflection is stopped, the unit consciousness will also cease to exist, and the existential life feeling of the microcosm will also cease to exist. But how to do this? The task of all the images in the mirrors is to rush headlong and merge themselves in the supreme entity, that is, the devotees must channelize their minds towards Paramapurusha and stop all reflections forever. Tata diviyoge nirabhashako yaha. When they merge, they arrive feeling Mahatvatva with all their joys and sorrows, thoughts and moods, hopes and aspirations in Paramapurusha. There remains no reflection.